to Barefoot in the Grass. Today I have my friend Kristen with me, and I am going to be, we're going to be working on how to make dairy kefir. So dairy kefir is such a healthy, probiotic filled drink. And in fact, the amazing thing about kefir is that it has up to 30 to 100 strains of probiotics.
Wow.
Versus yogurt only has about one to three strains often. So I mean, that's like such a lot more probiotics. And what we know now is all those probiotics are really important for our gut health. So, and kefir has been known to provide so many different health benefits. It helps heal from allergies. It helps heal skin conditions. Because what's happening is all those probiotics are really lining the gut and healing the gut. And so that is creating a real immune booster. Mm-hmm. And once your gut is healed and your immune system is healed, then it impacts so many other areas of your health. Mm-hmm. So I've even heard of people using kefir as part of healing their son's autism. So this is a powerful healing food. The other thing is, as far as vitamins and minerals, it is high in calcium and also K2. And those two nutrients work together to create bone health. So once you have your protein, you need calcium, but you also need K2 to help your body absorb that calcium. So this is a fantastic food for bone health, and also it's known as a feel-good drink. So in the original language, there was a term used that was a feel-good, for helping you feel good. So this is really almost like an antidepressant. It's that strong and that powerful. So I just would encourage everybody to step out of their comfort zone and try something new and different. This actually originated somewhere around the Caucasus Mountains. They think that it could have been a gift from the Prophet Muhammad to some of the Christian or some of the other tribes, and they really kept it a secret for a long time. They didn't want this special secret to get out. But at one point, there was a cheese manufacturing company in Russia, and they decided they had to have this health-giving secret. So they sent one of their beautiful employees, Irina, to go and capture the kefir grains. And it was a bit of a trial to get it, but eventually they did. So that's how it spread to Russia, and now we know it as a health food in the West, and it's kind of slowly catching on here in the States. So, oh yeah, one more thing that I just have to mention, which is kefir is awesome for helping you become more regular with your bowel movements. So, yay for easy poops, right? Seriously, it makes such a big difference, and if you're struggling with your digestion, this is just the perfect thing for you. All right, so let's start with the question of what do we culture our kefir in. And the ideal thing is to use glass, because if you use, the thing about kefir is it's acidic. And so if you put it in stainless steel or in plastic, it can actually leach from the materials. Like if there's any chemicals in the plastic, that can leach into your kefir. And stainless steel is also slightly reactive. So you always want to culture it in a glass. So that's the ideal, the ideal container to use. And you can use any old spaghetti jar. You don't have to have a fancy jar, but I like to use mason jars or the Bell jars, the glass jars. So where is the ideal place to find kefir grains? Kefir grains are the tiny little cultures that you're going to use. They are full of bacteria and yeast, and that is what helps culture your milk into kefir. And where's the best place to find these? So ideally you would get them from a friend or someone you know who is regularly making kefir, because then your grains will be activated. The other option is to buy them online. I know one source is Cultures for Health. Kombucha Camp also sells them. However, you're going to need to have a period of reactivation with those grains. So ideally you could find someone who's already making it, and then you don't have to go through that activation phase. The other option is to just check your health food store and see if you can get them there. So I guess you're lucky because you got a friend going, helping you out here. Yeah, any questions so far?
No, I'm excited for my kefir.
Yay! Cool. Now what are we going to look for in our finished kefir? So this one, you can see it has just a little bit of separation, and the longer you ferment your kefir, the more you'll see that the cream separates from the whey, or the curds in the whey. And I worked really hard to get this one just the right consistency, but it can separate quite easily. So once it's fermented for your full 24 hours, you're going to want to check it pretty regularly. And once you get a feel for how long it takes to get that good consistency, then you'll just know, each time you make it, this is approximately how many hours you need to let it sit for. Okay, so now what we're looking for is a little bit thicker than milk, but quite a bit thinner than yogurt. So it's right in between the little bit thicker and a little bit thinner. And it's also going to have a really nice sour flavor to it. And the longer it ferments, the more fizzy it gets as well, because it's fermenting. And what we have is some lactobacteria that are actually creating a more acidic pH, and that acidic pH is actually what resists harmful bacteria in our gut. So that's the good thing about kefir. If you're starting with non-activated grains, what you're going to need to do is start with a pint jar and put your non-activated grains in it. Fill up your pint with milk and let it sit for 24 hours, and then strain out the grains and refresh it with another 2 cups of milk. And you're going to need to keep doing that every 24 hours until your grains become activated, or you notice that your kefir is becoming thick and sour, which is what you're looking for. Yeah. So it might take a few cycles of that when you first start out with your non-activated grains. One more question. Sometimes people start with powdered kefir cultures. I personally have not tried that, so I can't speak from experience, but ideally you would start with activated grains or something that you can start. I think powdered grains they're not as strong of a culture, so you're going to get a weaker kefir that isn't maybe going to be as strong as you'd like over time. Okay, so now we get to the fun stuff. We get to make our kefir. So if you have activated grains, you can definitely refer to my Dairy Kefir Made Simple recipe. Today we're going to be looking at a medium batch and also doubling it for a larger batch. So I recommend if you're a newbie and you're not really familiar with the taste of it, to start out with this really tiny batch here. So that's going to be just a ½ cup of milk and a 1/4 teaspoon of kefir grains. So, all right, so let's see what we have. This is our, I made this kefir last night, and I just added the grains back in this morning so that Kristen can see what it looks like. So Kristen, why don't you go ahead and strain that into this strainer. And what I've got here is a stainless steel strainer, and she's gonna pour, go ahead and pour it in. And you'll see a big clump of grains come out as she pours. So, yeah, let's see. All right, so now what you're gonna do is take your rubber spatula and just kind of gently push the kefir away from the sides. You can see this is a nice medium texture, which is what you want. It's not quite, like I said, not quite as thick as yogurt, but thinner, thicker than milk. So why don't you give that a go? Just keep straining it until you see those cauliflower-like grains that will not be able to strain. And it's going to take her a little while to strain it all out. And you could even let it sit for a couple minutes right here and just allow it to naturally strain out. Some people say to not use a stainless steel strainer and to use a plastic strainer. I have tried a plastic strainer and I just prefer the texture of how it looks when I strain using my stainless steel strainer. And again, there is some reactivity with the Kefir and stainless steel, but for me, if it's just this one time of straining it out, it isn't going to impact it that much compared to the type of container that you actually store it in for that long period of fermentation. So I'm not too worried about using a stainless steel strainer. Okay, that looks pretty good, Kristen. So I just want to show everyone if they can see what these grains look like. So I've got about 2 tablespoons of grains right there. And what I'm gonna do, Kristen, how about you open this jar up? This is the jar. I'm gonna give this to you so you can have your own kefir at home. So I'm gonna break this into 2 and I'm gonna give her a tablespoon. I'm gonna get that onto the spoon, very good. And then put it in the jar. There you go. Okay, so what we've got here is, yeah, you can put that down right there. And I'm gonna go ahead, this is some nice thick cream with a bit of grains in it. For now, I'm just going to, I'm gonna pour all of this back into the jar. Okay, so here is the finished kefir. You can see it has a really nice texture to it. Okay, now what we're gonna do with the new grains here is we're gonna go ahead and start our new batch. And I've got some raw milk here. Now the other thing I needed to mention is if you start with grains that have not been activated, if they're from the store, from online, you're gonna need to start with pasteurized milk. Now I am a huge fan of raw milk, so this is the only time I would say to use pasteurized milk. You can make kefir on a regular basis with pasteurized milk. Obviously, I totally recommend using raw milk whenever you can. But it is, if you can't access raw milk, this is actually a really great way to add in some of those healthy probiotics and bacteria that you would be getting from raw milk, but you can't get in pasteurized milk because it's been heated up and to such high temperatures. So we will do, let's see, this is about a 2-cup batch, so this is the medium batch here on my recipe. So Kristen, go ahead and fill this up with the milk. I'll go ahead and fill it all the way up to the top, as much as milk as we've got in there. Great, yeah, that's perfect. All right, so what we're gonna do now is you don't wanna cover this up during your first fermentation period. You're gonna use a clean tea towel or some kind of very thin cloth that you can cover this up with. Now this is a little bit big, so you could probably find something a bit smaller. Go ahead and cover that up. Yep, that's great. And maybe what you can do is even wrap it around a bit. And one thing is we want to keep this out of the harsh sunlight. So this is a great way to actually help protect it from because the sunlight will help the bacteria to grow, which we don't want certain bacteria to grow. We want the right kind of bacteria to grow. Yeah. So and then the other thing I recommend is getting a little Post-it note and writing the date and the time that you've got it started. So as far as temperatures go, the ideal temperature is from about 70 to 80 degrees Fahrenheit. So you want to try and keep it within that range. If it's too much cooler than that, it's going to take a lot longer. You can actually make kefir in the fridge, but it's going to take a number of weeks to really culture. Whereas on the counter, if you leave it out on the counter between that 70 and 80, 74 is actually the perfect temperature. So It can be a little bit tricky. The warmer it is, the faster it'll culture, and the cooler it is, the longer it'll take to culture. So definitely put a little sticky on there. That'll help remind you of when to check it. So what we're going to do is we're going to let this sit on the counter for a full 24 hours. And then during that time, the milk will thicken and sour, and it'll start to culture. Start to do all that wonderful fermentation process that brings all those wonderful health benefits. And then after 24 hours, you're going to check it and see if it started to thicken. So let's just have a look at it. Let's just pretend this is the next 24 hours. So we started it at 10:30 p.m. and we're going to check it again at 10 p.m. the next night. All right, so what do we think? You can have a look at it, see kind of how thick it is right now. I mean, we just started this, so this is still super thin. You're going to wait until it's a little bit thicker and you start to notice the curds and whey separating. You can also drain out a little bit and taste it and see if it's gotten a little bit sour, that's how you want it to be. So, okay, so now once you have strained out your grains, so we're gonna leave this here. But once you have strained out your grains, what do you do? How do you store them, and how do you take care of them? So ideally, you would always have a new batch that's going. And if you're just starting out, you could maybe start with the tiny batch that I have on my recipe. And that way you just have like a half a cup all the time that's sitting on your counter. And then you can add that into your smoothies, or drink it plain, add some honey or stevia, some kind of sweetener to it. I personally love green stevia powder. To me, it just tastes amazing with kefir. But you need to find a way to slowly introduce it, and also to get your gut used to it, because all those healthy probiotics are actually really strong. And if you drink too much too soon, your body's going to have a little bit of a detox reaction, which is a good thing, but you just want to take it slow and easy and kind of slowly build your way up into drinking more of it. So, however, if you can't keep it going on your counter, or you're going on vacation, or you just decide you just need a break for a while, there's a couple of ways you can do that. The first option is to put it in the fridge. It can last for up to 2 weeks in the fridge, and you'll need to change your milk out after the first week. So every week it needs to be changed out. So you'll just strain out the grains and fill it back up with fresh milk. And that'll keep those grains active even though it's in the fridge. And that's only if it needs to be longer than that, you can put it in the freezer, and that can last for up to a couple of months. And then after those couple of months, you'll need to reactivate your grains, as I shared earlier in the video. They can also be dried, and what you do to dry them is simply lay them out on a paper towel and let them air dry in a well-ventilated area until they're nice and dry, and then that can last for up to a year. And then but again, you'll have to reactivate it, and it's going to take 2 to 4 weeks to get it back activated again. So these grains are super powerful. They last. They're really vigilant. They last a long time, but if you don't nurse them along all the time, they need to be reactivated depending on how they're being stored. Now, if we want to have a really fizzy kefir, a lot of people love making it almost like a carbonated beverage, which is so delicious and refreshing. It's just really wonderful. So all you're going to do is take your finished kefir and put the lid on it, not too tight, a little bit loosely, because if you put it on tight, the carbonation will build up and it could pop and the glass could shatter, which we don't want. So we need to have it loosely on and store it on your counter without the grains in it for another 24 hours. And it should have a really nice fizz in it. And this is called the second fermentation. During this second fermentation time, you can also add in some flavorings and different herbs to make it taste really, have some interesting flavors. You can do a chai and add in some cloves, and nutmeg and cinnamon is one option. Another one that I'm trying is lavender. So I actually tried this last night, and I have some lavender in there, which I'm going to strain out. And Kristen and I are going to taste this, but that's really great to help you fall asleep at night. And kefir is great for helping you fall asleep, by the way, too.
Oh, wow.
So, which we all need, right, in this busy, stressful, fast-paced world. So that's to make it fizzy. Just let it sit for after you've done your first fermentation for 24 hours. Go ahead and take the grains out and let it sit for another 24 hours on your counter. And then it'll be super fizzy. You can add in some flavorings. And I recommend a book called Fermenting Volume 3 Milk Kefir by Rochelle Johnson. And she has some really great recipes that you can try when you're just starting out with kefir and you want to play around with some smoothies, play around with some different drink options, just with your basic kefir. Now, once you've kind of gotten used to this whole kefir thing and you really want to start playing with different types and maybe make it into butter, use the whey, buttermilk, or make it into soups and sauces and different types of recipes. There's a really wonderful book called Homemade Yogurt and Kefir, and I'll put the link for this in the video. And this is by, not quite sure how to say it, Gina Caldwell. And she has some really more in-depth recipes for other things you can start to branch out once you've got your basic kefir down. So like I said, when you're just starting out, start out with the tiny batch and just get yourself and your family used to the flavor of it, and add in a little bit of sweetener, add it into smoothies, and of course you can always make the kefir bread recipe, which I have a printable for on my website. You would need, I believe it's 2 cups of kefir. I'm not quite sure, but I believe it's 2 cups. So yeah, that's basically all that you would need to know for making kefir, and I hope that this video really helps answer all the questions and helps you feel a little bit more confident about getting out there and trying this new thing, and it's going to be so worth it for your family. So what do you think, Kristen?
I'm excited to implement
Yay, high
kefir
five.
at home.